We have our one of our favorite speakers here today, Mel Horvath, Lucid. She's going to speak about the wisdom of winter, and I think she promised to bring some joy into it as well with our Advent Week of Joy. Quick little bio from Mel is a friend of unity, and we know that. So thank you, Mel, for being here. She's a wild creative and lifelong learner. She shows up in her work as an interfaith spiritual director. She's an ordained minister in the spiritual tradition and works in restorative justice with a focus on how we can do things differently towards love, towards peace, and towards healing. At her core, she cares about creating bigger spaces for belonging and seeks to encourage folks to begin from within. And with that, I'll shut down my slides and let Mel get started. Thank you, Mel, for being here. We look forward to this talk.
Good morning. I am honored to be here, and I'm just going to take a moment to bring my slides up and dive into the fourth of a series we've been playing with throughout the year on the hinges of the year. So today we are talking about the wisdom of winter, and we're weaving in the idea of Advent and joy within this conversation. So I want to take us back to a year in review. And throughout the seasons, we were talking on these hinges. I was sharing with you, and we were exploring deeply a Buddhist concept of the near enemy of these true potent possibilities. And in the spring, we were talking about love versus attachment. And a near enemy is the thing that feels so much like the real deal that we confuse the two. And so we spliced out this understanding that attachment oftentimes is rooted in this idea of fear of loss, fear of othering, fear of being rejected, not being seen, wanting to be liked, all of those different attachments we have. And so those attachments actually get in the way of love that is just there and ever present. Then we moved into the summer, the wild, unruly of summer, and we explored this idea of connection versus control. And I've grown even deeper to understand that connection is what is present when we are not trying to control, when we are simply showing up as our truest selves, and where we are inviting others to have space to show up as their truest selves. But remember, control sounds like something we would notice right away, but oftentimes it's not. And in my own life, I've noticed the ways for which I will give more than I wish to give to something in order to have an environment be something that I feel I can show up in. And what that means then is I may miss what is actually there, or I may stifle other people's potential to give into the space and to also share. So it becomes this deep reflective journey. Then we looked at the fall, and we were talking about the difference between autonomy versus codependence. And codependence is where our feelings, our emotions, what we think is really, really connected to external validation. So my feelings, my emotions are dependent on you and your feelings and your emotions. Or put in other words, the way I've identified this in my own life is an inner narrative that says, I am safe and okay if you are comfortable and happy. And what does it look like to say, I am safe and okay because I am comfortable and happy and I am being me in this world? And to become that safe person for others would mean then that I would have the capacity to hold them and their truth. Oof. So, what we reframe that as is autonomy as our ability to hold in tension our own objective morals and ethics in tension with our immediate desires. And so, I want to be seen and recognized in this moment. So, I'm going to yell to get it versus my bigger truth that says love is a mindset. So, I'm going to be loving in this moment. And what does that look like? And I'm going to challenge myself back toward it. And now I want to weave in this idea of joy versus exhilaration, right? Oof. And that means exhilaration is the close or near enemy to true and potent joy. And I want you to think about that for a moment, the ways for which we look for a hit, whatever it might be. And we do that and we think that's joy. And stay curious about that, because true joy has a softer texture. It's gentler, it's more present, it's in the little things, it's woven in, and it doesn't peak and valley in the same way. True joy, similar to that understanding of love, is ever present, and we draw on it differently. So, as we weave together some of these ideas, I want to remind us of what Advent actually means: the arrival of a notable person, thing, or event. And I remember Rev Sharon years ago sharing a Eckhart Tolle quote that said, "The greatest tragedy would be if Christ was born once 2,000 years ago." And in this way, then, this invitation is not the arrival of faith, hope, joy, and love, um, but rather our remembering of the togetherness of this, the invitation to deeper understanding of these ever-present and potent capacities within our lives. The second piece I want to draw our attention to is the over 11 holidays that happen in December alone. And the groovy kind of cool thing about all those different holidays happening in December alone is the light. And it's this idea and celebration of the light. And the cool thing about Unity is Unity holds a big enough container to hold all of this. And that's part of the reason why I value speaking at Unity, is because our container is bigger. We know that it is the all. And within the all, however we come to this place of understanding, is the light. And the groovy thing about seeming paradoxes is that they both exist. It's a both and. And this both and becomes a mindset for life. So paradoxically, we are going into the darkest time of the year, seasonally, winter. And this is also the birth of and the return of light at the same time. That is part of the reason why this time of year is so potent and precious, because there is a seemingly paradox, opposite paradox, existing both at the same time in very loud narrative that can invite us to see ourselves bigger within it. Then from there, you have on Wednesday the service on the 12 powers and the Advent weaving together. And this is the reminder. In the fall, I talked about the 12 powers being a spiritual mapping for growth. And that while you may choose to focus in on a particular power, all of those powers are there and present for us every single moment. It's part of the reason why that idea in and of itself is so overwhelming that we can't even possibly imagine what it would look like to light that middle Christ candle. The union of all of these things. We are the union of all of these things. That is, whoo, overwhelming. And if you said to me, do you find yourself holding all those powers at the same time? No, not at all. I find myself deeply diving into love these days and finding more and more forms and iterations. That's the infinite. So our commitment then becomes to the journey of opening and possibilities and curiosities. That's what Unity calls us into. The infinite. Whatever you think is there, there's more. Wherever you think is done is a beginning, where we are both equally going into the darkest time of the year and the return of light at the same moment. Yes, it's possible, because we're doing it. So when we think about what we want to focus on, we also want to hold intention with that, all that is possible. Then we have the winter, and I'm weaving here this idea, this deep question from Parker Palmer, which is this: is the life that I am living the one that wants to be lived in me? And the wisdom of winter is that we slow down, we go in, we get still. That's an uncomfortable question. We allow ourselves to get uncomfortable. We learn to sit with it. And in learning to sit with it, we come back into our truest feelings. This body is an adventure suit, and the wisdom that we have as part of our potent possibility. I want to share with you today a story. And it's a story of an awareness that I've had over the last year in a journey with one key person who I have their permission to share and speak with them by name and share this experience. But it's remembering that life is lived and changed in the smallest of moments, and that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that we are both each other's teachers and we are equally students. And so unity is about consciousness, and consciousness is about waking up to the areas for which we have fallen asleep. And it will be both joyful and sorrow filled. It will be filled with love and pain. And oftentimes we seek to avoid those hinge seasons, the transition from spring to summer, summer to fall, because there's so much that we have to learn how to hold faith, hope, joy, and love within if we live truly in that expansion of ourselves and we truly live into the consciousness and become awake. My friend's name and my coworker's name is Julian. Julian is a Black man from Georgia who holds other identities that often have him experiencing othering. I myself, over the last 3 years, have gone on a deep dive journey into the ways that I've othered myself. And I've come to notice certain things. I've shared them in different sermons here and different conversations and talks that we've had, both individually with folks and also on a Sunday morning. And these ways of othering have helped me to see the ways for which when we dismiss ourselves, we will dismiss one another. When we dismiss our feelings, we will dismiss the feelings of others. When we dismiss our own experience of an aspect of ourselves that we believe doesn't have room to be or ought not to be seen, that we will then inevitably dismiss another. And so for whatever reasons, Julian chose to sit in conversations and converse with me about hard subjects, about subjects of the ways for which we other ourselves, about subjects of the ways for which we miss that love is potent. And there was something in Julian that I could see immediately, and I learned to trust it. Julian's life had offered incredible amounts of othering and incredible amounts of pain and oppression. And yet Julian chose somehow to speak both truthfully and honestly about the pain and the struggle, but also about the potency of love. And in that, I could feel this texture of truth and love presence that was a word that I think we don't quite understand, which is resilience. And this resilience came from feeling all of the darkness and choosing to love anyway. And in those moments of conversation and me sharing the ways for which I was coming back to myself, Julian said something to me that I want to plant the seed of in you today, that has been echoed through 2 years of my Vajrayana Shagpa Kagyu tradition Buddhism training. And it is that in a world that has said to us, no pain, no gain, is this understanding of inherent joy and pleasure and inviting it in. Oof. And so Julian sits in this moment and he says to me something, have you heard about joy as a discipline? And I said, no, tell me. And he said, just the same way that you know life is going to be life, it's going to be all the things. You can choose to live joy as a discipline. And mirroring that, of course, because the universe works in synchronicity, is a program that says, our world has told us no pain, no gain, but that's not true. The truth is joy is ever present, just like love is ever present. And we know this. Unity teaches us this. So from another direction, unity says it's in all of it. You are full beings and it's in all of it. And this joy is bigger than whatever it is you're holding in this moment, if we allow it to be. So I want to talk about a real tangible practice that has changed my life. And it is asking myself one question and then giving myself that thing. And I'll use my most annoying example. I have data entry as part of my work. It's just got to happen. I got to do the data entry. I'm not going to get around doing the data entry. And in fact, I can see the ways for which doing data entry can support my job and further ease challenges and increase communication. I can intellectually get it. Okay. I don't enjoy data entry. When it's time to do data entry, I ask myself this: what could I offer myself in this moment that would invite me to enjoy this just a little bit more? And all of a sudden, a candle was lit and a cup of tea was made. And I would take 5 minutes, I would do 20 minutes of work and take 5 minutes breaks. And I would read poetry by John O'Donohue, or I would write a meaningful quote to myself for 5 minutes. And then I would go back to the task. And I noticed the task was less laborsome when I was giving myself what I needed through this question of what would I enjoy, what would bring me pleasure right now. That is revolutionary. Joy is revolutionary. And so Julian said it was important to me, or to him, that I name that the idea of joy as a discipline actually comes from a different comic and activist who is Robin Thade, who said joy as a discipline, who was actually quoting the work of Miriam Kaba, who was challenging us to look at hope as a discipline. And then I would invite us to consider peace as a discipline and love as a discipline. And so, in the same way that we can look at life as life just happens, we can also intentionally weave in with discipline the idea of love, joy, hope, and peace. And I don't know what that would look like as a whole, because I've only spent 1 year of my life asking myself that one question: what can I add to this moment to increase the pleasure and joy, whatever it is? And shocking to me was finding out that data entry could become something that I could enjoy. And not because I enjoy the data entry, it's still there, it's still happening, but because I've softened the spaces around that tension. And I invite you to consider that as a bigger idea. It's the same as in yoga. When I was leading classes, I used to say, breathing into those spaces of tension and relaxing them. Now I've heard language that resonates more deeply, which it's breathing and noticing those aspects of tension within yourself. Now noticing those aspects of softness that are around those areas of tension and inviting them to hold that tension within you. So I'm no longer escaping discomfort, but rather learning how to sit with it, my own and others. As I do that, I come to meet aspects of myself that I would have denied, that I would have dismissed, and I start to create room for them again through the gentler aspects of myself. Unity calls us back into consciousness, into awareness of the subtle, of curiosity, of possibility, toward faith, toward hope, toward joy, toward love. Unity equips us with spiritual growth map through the 12 powers and invites us to practice them as a discipline, choosing to weave these into our lives. And so there is a poem that I'm not going to read in full that came across my awareness this December. And the last line of it says this: joy is not a trick. And for some of us, we've come to believe it is. We've come to question joy, to be skeptical of joy, perhaps too of love, of hope, of peace. And greater awareness brings us back to this idea of what it looks like to invite it, to acknowledge that life's going to be hard, challenging, and that we can invite with discipline, with intention, with care, the weaving back of the advent of joy, hope, love, and peace to deepen our understanding. It's an ongoing relationship. We're not going to finish that relationship. We're going to continue it. And so before I summarize, I will share this. And I loved that it was shared already in the pre-part of the service. This time of year is both the most challenging time of year for me, single-handedly the hardest month of the year for me. And it is potent with joy. But I've become curious about this one thing. Why is it so much harder for me, December? And I would say there's a lot of reasons, and I've deeply examined those. But I'll offer one thing that I've been sitting with this year mostly. It's the song "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year." And it's the first time that I've jokingly and with joy and laughter in my heart laughed at how we just like say something. This is the most wonderful time of the year. I'm like, have you not met summer nights? Have you like it is dark, gray, cold, and barren out there. Um, and so when I allowed myself to jokingly acknowledge that and to say, now what do I want to add as joy, as discipline? Now what do I want to do? The sorrow within me decreased simply through the acknowledgement that this is not the most wonderful time of year for me. And that's okay. And now, what do I want to add as joy, as a discipline? Now, what do I want to weave in? Once I acknowledge that thing, it tends to lose its power. And when I intentionally and with discipline invite joy back in, it tends to increase. So, in summary, over the course of the year in 4 different seasons, life will continue to be a mixed bag. Add joy consciously. Risk with courage the journey towards consciousness. It's a growing willingness to accept the all of life and yourself. When we do that, we will inherently and inevitably grow our capacity to accept others and grow our ability to see the ways for which we other ourselves through our narrow or less evolved ways of thinking. We already know that to be true because unity is built firmly in the idea of possibility, of curiosity, of wonder, of love as bigger than, of joy as bigger than, peace as bigger than, hope as bigger than. I'm not saying anything that unity hasn't already said. But what I've noticed is this: the practice is layered, nuanced, challenging, growth promoting, and absolutely worth it. But it will cause us to come to places where we need to both be able to both and our way through it, to hold both love and truth and the pain and the sorrow at the same time. And that's where potential tends to grow, is the space between whatever those polarities we think are within ourselves, to be able to hold those. It is in the spaces of asking ourselves, what aspects are you allowing to be seen and acknowledged, and to meet those people who can witness and be witnessed. What that means is, to the degree that we are able to accept those aspects of ourselves, we will be able to hold space for others with love, with joy, with peace, with possibility. To the degree that we haven't, we will dismiss ourselves and others. It's okay. It's just simply noticing that. And noticing at our core, we are a society longing to be. And then I'd weave it back to the question from Parker Palmer. Is the life that I am living the life that wants to be lived in me? To live that question, to breathe that question, and to stay curious. So I invite you now into a time of meditation. Perhaps you wish to soften your gaze or close your eyes. Perhaps you tune into my voice or tune out. Either is fine. And I offer from my heart my poem that I wrote this year for solstice. Feel free to take what works for you, leave what doesn't. I'm smiling to myself that I'm reading this at 11:11 in the morning this year. I will not long for a summer gone. with endless days of light, warm breeze, or dream of a spring to come, the grand thaw, the softening. I am drawn to this darkness now, to the space between the stars, between the inhale and the exhale, to my capacity to create space between hustle and bustle. We brand the darkness, hang lights on it. We tell ourselves it's the most wonderful time of the year. It is also grayness, cold, seemingly barren, that invites us to look, to see, to cultivate through rest and tenderness, with wind that stings the cheeks. We armor up with our coats and outerwear to walk upon the snow and go on with the show, only slower. While other animals slumber, others still dance and play in winter's magic. Winter says either way, slow down. See the flakes like diamonds on the surface. Take time with the sprouts in you growing underneath the snow. Rest, love. Let go like fall leaves. Let the cold wind blow. The wisdom of winter has much to teach us. The most simplest of joys is already here in the slowdown. In the gratitude. Winter calls us back into the question, the uncomfortable question. Is the life I'm living the life that wants to live in me? And drawing from a most beautiful line in the song that was shared at the beginning. May you be kissed by the moon. May you open and become willing to allow yourself to be kissed by the moon. This is the wisdom of joy as a discipline.